statistical, mathematical fact
never has been down.
has broken every single record. There is no asset that has come close.
It's the only thing in the industry that was not touched, that was not hacked, and it never fails doing what it promised in 2009. It's never
What's
failed.
the best performing asset the world has ever seen? And you'll find out.
What I
that it's
wanted to
Bitcoin.
talk to you about today is the upcoming Bitcoin halving, and how I believe this halving, which is going to happen in the next few days, is likely going to be the most unique halving in modern history. It has the potential of being one of the most important ones, if not the most important halving for quite some time, in my opinion. And I believe this halving, the one that is going to happen in the next few days, has the potential to change your life, to change our lives forever, and potentially change the entire bloodline of your family for generation after generation. Now, that's a tall order, but I'm hoping by the end of my talk today, you'll understand why I mean that. Let's delve into the material here today. What is the halving? This is the most unique thing for a financial instrument, an asset, or a money. Now, it's really interesting because, guys, I will tell you this, that Bitcoin is so unique of an item that is burst on the human scene that we don't really have set categories into which Bitcoin fits. And it's very difficult when you can't place it somewhere because it's almost everything. We've never had an asset like Bitcoin. We've never had a money like Bitcoin. We've never had a technology like Bitcoin. And this makes it hard to even distinguish, is Bitcoin a technology? Is Bitcoin money? Is Bitcoin an asset? And it's actually all of these. And even if you consider Bitcoin to be a technology, a money, or an asset, one of the things that distinguishes it from any other technology, asset, or money is the fact that every 4 years it experiences this event called the halving, where its issuance rate gets cut in half. There is no money that humans have ever come in contact with that has its issuance cut in half. All monies actually increase in supply. We've never had an asset that goes backwards in its issuance. We've only had assets that increase their supply forever. A lot of people assume that gold is scarce. Gold is not scarce. Gold increases its supply every single year. It's been doing so for 6,000 years. There's no end in sight. And its scarcity is only limited by human ingenuity and human profitability. If gold were to go from $2,000 to $4,000, a lot more gold would start to become mined, increasing the supply. But Bitcoin is the only money, the only technology, the only asset we have ever had experience with that actually goes backwards. It goes the other way. It becomes more scarce. Its issuance gets cut in half every 4 years on average. Let's talk about this a little bit. This is actually, I'm not going to delve into this because this actually deserves an individual talk itself, but this is the mathematical equation this is part of the code, the mathematical equation that literally guarantees that virtually every single 4 years, the issuance rate, the amount of Bitcoin that actually gets exposed or comes into existence or gets exposed to the human race, becomes accessible by the human race. This is the formula. And what's really fascinating, guys, is that this happens without any human intervention. No human being can change it. No human being can alter it. No human being can influence it. It's almost like an eclipse or something that the human race can witness, but has no control over. And this is extraordinarily astounding to me. This is Bitcoin's entire monetary policy, because Bitcoin has 33 epochs, which are 33 more or less 4-year periods, but it has 32 halvings. So the first one doesn't count. The first epoch of 4 years doesn't count. The halving started after the first 4 years for the most part. So the first halving happened after the first 4 years. So, but this is Bitcoin's monetary policy laid out all the way to the year 2140. Now, as you can see, or hopefully you can see it, at the top, we start off with the biggest amount of supply being made available. 50 Bitcoin every single 10 minutes on average is being released into the world. In 4 years, that gets cut in half from 50 to 25 Bitcoin every single 10 minutes, more or less, gets released into the world, and on. From 25, we go to 12.25 and 12 and a half, and then we go from 12 and a half to 6.25 and so forth and so on. But this policy, this halving policy, is already set in stone. No one can change it. No one can influence it. This will play out without any human intervention all the way to the year 2140. This is extraordinarily powerful. We'll talk about this a little more as we go forward. This upcoming halving brings us to a new issuance rate of only 3.125 Bitcoin every single 10 minutes on average. So if you look to the left of this image, we started off with 50 Bitcoin being made available or issued to the human world, the human beings, every 10 minutes or so. And then we went in 2012, we went to it. Bitcoin experienced its first halving, and it went from 50 Bitcoin to 25 Bitcoin. From 25 Bitcoin in 2016, we halved again to 12.5 Bitcoin being released into the world on average every 10 minutes. And then in 2020, and I believe it was May of 2020, we experienced the third halving, where we went from 12.5 to 6.25, which is where we are now for the last few days of an issuance rate of 6.25 Bitcoin being released into the world, all right, on average every 10 minutes. Saturday sometime, perhaps maybe in the morning using Eastern time, New York time, what will happen automatically without any human intervention, without any influence, without any men operating behind the scenes, the issuance rate, right, after block 840,000 will instantly go from 6.25 to 3.125 and remain at that issuance rate for the next 4 years. All right. This will drop the daily amount of Bitcoin that becomes available to the human race from 900 a day. On Saturday, it will drop to 450 Bitcoin per day. Now, what's really interesting about this is that you can imagine that if you can do the calculation, right, at roughly $63,000 a Bitcoin, all right, what's the value of 6.25 Bitcoin being released into the world? That value is very, very high, but I guarantee you that it's tremendously, even though the supply is less, the value is tremendously higher per Bitcoin than all the way back in obviously 2010. So 6.25 Bitcoin is far more valuable than 50 Bitcoin back in 2010, 2011, 2012. And so despite the fact that the amount being released into the world is shrinking, the value per unit is exponentially exploding. All right. And we're going to come back to this point because I think it's extraordinarily important. And not understanding this makes one believe that the halvings in the future will have less impact because we're getting down to smaller and smaller amounts. I say it goes the other way. I say that's backwards thinking. The more valuable the item becomes, the more impactful the halving. We'll come back to that. Not the least impactful. We go from 6.25 to 3.125 this upcoming Saturday, more or less, in 3 days or so. This is an historic event. We won't see another one for another 4 years, but this one, I believe, is going to be one of the most important ones of all the halvings. Why is the halving so important? Well, it comes down to supply and demand dynamics, right? So I want you to think about the fact that right now Bitcoin is trading more or less $62,000, $63,000. There's a certain amount of demand that has Bitcoin floating around 63,000. That means that there's buy demand to support 63,000. Now remember, there's 6.25 new Bitcoin coming into the world, and someone's willing to grab that. Do you understand? Someone's willing to hold on to that, grab it at 63 and hold on to it. All right. Or the miners might hold on to the Bitcoin, or they might sell the Bitcoin. And if they sell this new Bitcoin that just came into existence, someone is willing to buy it at 63. If that were not the case, we wouldn't be around 62, 63. So there's demand at 62, 63. But on Saturday, the amount that becomes available for the demand that is existing for 900 Bitcoin, the same amount of money is now only going to have access to 50% of it. Croesus BTC here has old numbers here where he's saying if the money coming into Bitcoin to grab new Bitcoin is roughly 900 million. It's supporting the Bitcoin price with 900 million on average demand per period, per day, or what have you. If the supply all of a sudden drops to 450 and you still have the same demand, if the demand doesn't change and the supply drops, it automatically creates a supply crunch. And so the halving will tend to always have an upward pressure on the Bitcoin price. All right. The only way there would be equilibrium is if the demand and the supply got cut in half simultaneously. This almost never happens. All right. The demand for Bitcoin stays every single day around the same amount, and the supply instantly gets cut in half. That higher demand, that demand which doesn't move or doesn't get affected, now starts chasing a smaller number of Bitcoins, causing an upward pressure. Some Bitcoiners, in my opinion, who haven't spent the time going over the historical norm of the halvings, right? What they assume, and what a lot of newbies are assuming, is that this supply crunch or this upward pressure on Bitcoin's price happens right away. That's not the case. It takes about 6 to 9 months for the new dynamics to work through the entire system. Nothing happens instantly. So I don't want anyone out there saying, well, okay, Saturday, we should start seeing the price rise to the upside. Not necessarily, maybe, not necessarily. And I don't want you to be spooked if there is seemingly this elongated period where it seems like the halving was a dud. No, it's not a dud. It takes 6 to 9 months for this to actually work its way into all the veins, into all the arteries of the network, and then start to have that price shock, that price effect. So I want you to think that Saturday's halving will start to have an effect before the US presidential election, right around the presidential election, maybe a little before. All right. That's what I want you to think. Halving happened Saturday, a little bit before the US presidential election in early November. We should start to see the effect of Saturday's halving. Keep that in mind. Make a note. This is another image, great image by Croesus BTC. Shout out to him. Love his work. What you are seeing here is the supply issuance get dropped by half every single 4 years. See, the yellow in the far left-hand side was at the top 50. We went from 50 to 25 in 2012. And from 2012, we went to 2016, dropping from 2016 at 25, dropping in 2020 to 12.5, and so forth and so on. Now, this image has the halvings all the way out to 2034, where you virtually have almost all of the supply available and accessible to the world. In the final epoch, actually, of Bitcoin, all the way back in the final 4 years, this 2140, every 10 minutes, one Satoshi will be made available. Its final 4 years, only one Satoshi on average, every 10 minutes will be made available to the world. Can you imagine what the value of one Satoshi should be all the way back in 2150 if the idea is that the value every 4 years must become higher because the asset becomes scarcer and other dynamics, which we'll talk about. This is very, very powerful. Now, some people have referred to Bitcoin as a Ponzi scheme. I say what's on the left is the Ponzi scheme. Debt skyrocketing, no upward cap on the money supply. All right. More money has to be printed or created to service the increasing debt. I say that the left is the Ponzi. Bitcoin is far from the Ponzi. Which looks more sound to you? Which looks more controlled to you? Which one looks more responsible to you? It's the green on the right-hand side. The last 70, 80 years or so of money supply. Look at the money supply all the way dating back to 1958, 1959. It's a perpetual move to the upside. All right. Whereas that if we go back, Bitcoin supply tapers off. Bitcoin supply tapers off. There is no tapering off of fiat currency supply. All right. There is no tapering off. There might be brief pauses like you've seen over the last few blue dots here, but those blue dots, that's just a temporary pause, which typically is only a resting pit stop for exponential rise afterwards. All right. You can see that in the mid to late 1980s, early 1990s, you had that pause as well. And then it was just an explosive move out of that pause to the upside. I believe Bitcoin is warning and it is signaling that these blue dots are about to go to the upside in a very, very ballistic way. Bitcoin has no top because fiat currency has no top. Bitcoin's rise is because fiat currency supply rises forever. And if currencies will never stop rising, Bitcoin will never stop rising. Bitcoin is a response to rising fiat currency supply. And fiat currencies will never stop inflating, will never stop inflating, which means that Bitcoin, whose very existence is tied to the inflating fiat currencies around the world, if the currencies won't stop inflating, Bitcoin's price won't stop inflating. It's going up forever. Let's look at some prior halvings, guys. Let's take a look at some prior ones, okay? This is very important. So we know that we went from 50 to 25, 25 to 12.5, 6.25, which we are now, and in a few days, we're going to 3.125. We already discussed this, right? Take a look at this chart right now, and I want you to take a look at the price on each one of Bitcoin's halvings. And I want you to make a note mentally of the exponential jump in price every single halving. So we start in 2009 at zero. Bitcoin did not have a price for about a year, maybe slightly more than a year. It organically, through market demand, spurned a price. No human being set a price. No individual decided to value Bitcoin here. It was done organically through natural market forces, making it the fairest money to ever come into existence. This is not like an altcoin or a shitcoin where you have a bunch of people in some foundation deciding what the value is. There was no human being that set the price of Bitcoin. Bitcoin was at zero. It potentially could have stayed at zero, but through natural forces, natural supply and demand, a price was born with no human intervention whatsoever. All right. We started zero. The first halving, we're from 0 to 12. That's an exponential jump. Huge. Enough to change your life. $12. The next halving date, Bitcoin was at $653. Exponential jump up from 12. Then the next halving in 2020, we went from 653 on the date of the halving. Bitcoin was at 8,568. Today, 3 days before, what is Bitcoin at right now? 3 days before the halving. So we'll know the date in 3 days. We are at 62,800. Exponentially higher than the last halving price. Now, take a moment, look at the price jumps from halving date to halving date to halving date. Now, the reason that I want you to spend a moment looking at this is because I want to tell you that everything else is noise. Everything else is noise, except the date of the halving and the price. That's it. Bitcoin is mathematically designed, mathematically coded to go up in value every 4 years of its existence, every 4 years of your life forever. And it will go up every 4 years of your children's lives and their children's lives and their children's lives forever. It's going up forever. Every other price between the halving prices, that's all noise. That's noise, part of which is designed to shake you off of this thing, to shake you out of this thing. But if you could just buy Bitcoin on the halving date, all right, and like Rip Van Winkle, go to sleep for 4 years and wake up on the next halving date, you're going to be exponentially wealthier, more valuable, richer. You, your family, everyone involved. Now, some people say, well, Oliver, how do we know Bitcoin's going to last a long time? Well, because human beings can't touch it. Human beings fuck up everything, right? But human beings can't touch Bitcoin. Human beings can't influence it. Human beings can't control it. Human beings can't confiscate it. They can't take it. They can't steal it. It is outside of the realm of all types of human influence. And we've never had something totally outside of the hands of human beings. Every single thing that human beings have touched, they've messed it up. But this is the first thing that's outside of human control. In fact, this is the first asset, the first money that actually pays human beings to work for it. When's the last time? Tell me what other asset actually has a pay scale for the human race and pays them. Bitcoin has a pay scale all the way out to 2,140. I showed it to you, right? I showed you its pay scale. Here's Bitcoin's pay scale. This is Bitcoin's monetary policy. This is what it has presented to the human race. It is telling the human race that every 10 minutes, I'm willing to pay anyone who contributes to the network, anyone who wants to work for me. Bitcoin saying, I will pay you 6.25 Bitcoin every single 10 minutes. But it's a competition amongst you. Now go, and anyone can work for me. There is no asset that has done that. There is no network that has done that. There is no money that actually hires human beings. This is the first thing, the first species of it, the first of a new species, the first type of asset, the first type of money, the first type of technology that lives on its own, that has no, it is not influenced by any human being, that can't be stopped by the human race, that can't be touched by the human race, that can't be influenced, that can't be stolen, that can't be confiscated, can't be influenced in any way, and the first one that pays the human race to protect it and to work for it. This is insane, guys. And we're going to witness this upcoming Saturday, that this living thing, and it must be living, this living money, this living asset, this living piece of technology is going to do something without our control. It's going to cut its issuance from 6.25 to 3.125 while the demand stays the same. The demand from humans stay the same. It's very, very powerful. Now, Vince is saying, do you think the price will move up after halving? I guess you just showed up. This is something I just talked about, where there is, guys, there is this 6 to 9 month delay, more or less, when it comes to supply and demand dynamics. It's not an instant thing. It might happen instantly, but what I'm telling you is that the effect of any any supply, any change in the supply demand dynamics, that usually takes about 6 to 9 months to work itself in the system. So I want you thinking US presidential election time. Halving happens on Saturday. I want you to think by the election, by the US presidential election, Bitcoin should be freaking rocking, because it's starting to experience the effect of this incredible halving event. All right. US presidential election time, which gives us a very small window to do what we need to do to make sure it becomes a life-changing period for us. Guys, 62,500, despite the FUD, despite everything that went on, despite the regulators hating on Bitcoin, despite Elizabeth Warren and the Biden administration trying to do this with the industry and trying to tax the miners, despite the China ban on mining, despite all of the negativity with FTX and all of the blowups with BlockFi and Celsius and all the fraud in the system and all the doubting and all the negative tweets by the Peter Schiffs of the world and all the shitting on Bitcoin, from the last halving price, 8,568, today it's 62,800, and we're a few days away from the next halving. All you've got to do, guys, this is the easiest trade of your life. This is the easiest wealth building play of your life. The easiest. and you can't mess it up. Halving price to halving price. That's it. And ignore the noise in between, all of its noise. It's just halving price to halving price, halving price to somebody type that for me. I want to see it. I'm not even going to go on to the next point unless I see this, guys. Type it for me. I want to see it. Halving price to halving price, halving price to halving price. Can someone type that for me? I want to see it, guys, in the comments. Do it for me. Indulge me. Halving price to halving price. That's it. Ignore your family, ignore your friends, ignore your neighbors, ignore your church groups, ignore the news, ignore the politicians, ignore all the so-called experts, and certainly ignore the crypto bros on YouTube and Twitter. Ignore all of them. Halving price to halving price, halving price to halving price. It's the most certain thing in the universe today. It is the most certain money, the most certain asset that we have ever been exposed to. And your doubting it is not doing you and your family any favors now. Bitcoin is maths. Maths can't be controlled or influenced by human beings. 1 + 1 = 2 every single freaking time. I don't care what the news says. I don't care what a politician says. I don't care what a crypto bro says. I don't care what your family says. I don't care what your minister says, whatever. 1 + 1 = 2. Bitcoin is maths, and it goes through this mathematical halving every single 4 years without fail. The halvings, they make Bitcoin more scarce, right? Now think about it. Some people take issue with me, guys, when I say this. Well, Oliver, they say, and I don't know why they always do their neck like this when they talk to me, and they fold their hands like this. Well, Oliver, what's that head shake about? Well, Oliver, the Bitcoin halvings don't really make the existing Bitcoins more scarce. They're still coming into existence. That's less scarce. But I would strongly encourage that you look at this differently. I want you to assume that all of the 21 million Bitcoin that will ever exist in the world, it's actually a tiny bit less, but all of the Bitcoin that will ever exist in the world, I want you to understand that they already exist. We already know that they're there. They're locked. Here, guys, they're locked. Here they are. I showed them to you, right? I showed you all of the Bitcoin. They're right there. Take a look. Take a look again. They're right there. All of them. You can't do that with gold. You can't do that with uranium, silver, copper, the US dollar, the Argentinian peso, can you? You can't map it out like that. So the only way you can map something out is that it's already there. It's already in the code. It's already locked in time. Do you understand that the Bitcoin exists? It's just being released to the human race on a certain schedule. It's no different, guys, from you have a bakery shop and you're only limited to 20, you can only make 21 of these special cookies. Everybody in the neighborhood, they need these cookies, but you only have 21. You bake 21 in the wee hours of the morning for the mad rush in the morning, 21. In the first hour, 19 of them sold. That didn't inflate the supply of Bitcoin. That didn't inflate the supply of your donuts or your cookies. You issued 19 of an existing 21 cookies. So the issuance of Bitcoin every 10 minutes is not inflating anything. It's unlocking what's already there. You understand? And when you look at it this way, you're looking at it more appropriately, and you realize Bitcoin doesn't have an inflation rate, it has an issuance rate. An inflation rate would be if someone could add to the 21 million. I can't inflate the 21 million. I can only issue the 21 million on a specific schedule. By shrinking, cutting the halving, cutting the unreleased supply in half, must create a powerful craze for what's left. So let's go a little bit further with the donut. You have the most popular bakery in your neighborhood. And these cookies are all the rage, but you can only do 21 a day. Today, you've got 21. In the first hour, 19 go. So you realize that they go so quickly that you're like, okay, the next, I've only got 2 more cookies. I'm gonna actually now cut each cookie in half, and I'm gonna sell the half. The demand for the half goes through the roof. It creates a greater frenzy. It doesn't create a smaller frenzy. It creates a greater frenzy. So this greater frenzy makes Bitcoin more scarce. The other thing that I think a lot of people fail to think about is that I know this applies to almost every asset, but I still think it's worth me mentioning, guys. Every Bitcoin that gets released must be owned by someone. Like, you can't have a Bitcoin that's not owned that has been issued. It must be owned by someone. Think about that. It's not like it could sit on the shelf. The ones sitting on the shelf haven't been issued yet, but the ones that have been released into the world, they are always owned. Some human being owns it. And I want you to think that there's 19,600,000 Bitcoin, more or less, have already been issued. Let's call it 19.5 million Bitcoin have already been released, and they're all owned, all of them. And there's only going to be 21 million left. I'm only going to be 21 million. This is incredibly insane, guys, incredibly insane. How is Bitcoin more valuable? It becomes more valuable, people, because of several things. It becomes more valuable because demand rises over time. So the demand rises for the item over time, but the supply that's being demanded doesn't ever rise, ever. 21 million is 21 million is 21 million. Now, I want you to think about this. I want you to think that there are 8.1 billion people on planet Earth today. Less than half of 1% of 8.1 billion own Bitcoin today. Think about this. Less than half of 1%, not 1%. Less than half of 1% of 8.1 billion people own Bitcoin today. Now, on top of this, 200,000 new human beings are born every single day. We add to the 8.1 billion every single day by net number of 200,000, give or take. That's crazy. There's 200,000 new future Bitcoiners being born every single day. Even if we didn't have that, half of 1% of 8.1 billion people, half of 1% produced an asset that went from 0 to 63,000. Half of 1% did that. What? Guys, Are you following me? Half of 1%, a little speck, caused Bitcoin to go from 0 to 63,000. From 0 to $1.3 trillion. Half of 1%. Where is it going to be with 1%, 3%, 10%, 20%? Dare I say 60%? Half of 1% of the world population has adopted Bitcoin, has Bitcoin, owns Bitcoin, and it has produced the best performing asset the world has ever known with half of 1%. What? With half of 1%, it has beat every single thing that human beings have ever held dear over a 15-year period. It has taken number one in every conceivable metric you can think of. Best performing asset in an hour in the history of the world. Best performing asset in a day in the history of the world. Best performing asset in a week in the history of the world. Best performing asset in a month. Best performing asset in a quarter. Best performing asset in a year. Best performing asset in 3 years. Best performing asset in 5 years. Best performing asset in 10 years. Best performing asset in 15 years. It is number one in every conceivable category. It has beat every single thing that human beings have ever held dear by a long shot. It's become the best performing asset the world has ever known. It's gone from 0 in value to 1.3, $1.4 trillion in value. And it's gone from 0 to $63,000 per unit with half of 1% of 8.1 billion people. Guys, listen to me carefully. We're not going down from half of 1%. It's not going down. It is idiotic to be like, oh, well, we've topped out. It's half of 1% adoption, half of 1% of the world. It's finished. It's over. It's a bubble. How can you be a bubble at half of 1%? How can you be going the other way at half of 1%? How is it possible for things to be over at half of 1%? This is idiotic. It's dumb. It's stupid. We haven't even started. There's 32 halvings. We're on the 4th one. We haven't even this is the warm up. Half of 1% is the warm up. To use a sporting analogy, you haven't even gotten to the parking lot yet, much less be in the stadium, on the field, playing the game. You haven't even parked yet. It's crazy when you think about this. If this little tiny insignificant taste caused this, just imagine where we're going to be at 5% adoption. It's mind-blowing. Guys, every single second, Bitcoin becomes scarcer. Why? Because more human beings are born. 200,000 more human beings are born every single day, making the amount of Bitcoin available per human being goes down significantly every single day. But wait a minute. Now there's 200,000 more people to share this thing with. Oh, wait a minute. Tomorrow, there's 200,000 more people to share this with. And the next day, there's 200,000 more people to share this with. And if the assumption is that over time, everyone will want something that no human being can touch, control, take from you, steal from you, confiscate, debase on you, inflate away. No human being can touch this. If it is our assumption that as understanding grows, that this is mathematically guaranteed to go up in value every single 4 years, forever. As that understanding grows, as Oliver keeps talking about it, as Oliver won't shut up about it, and other people as well, as the understanding starts to grow, the assumption must be that we're not going to stay at half of 1%, that we're going to go to 1%, then 3%, then 5%, then 10%, because who's not going to want something that's mathematically guaranteed to go up in value every 4 years, that gets scarcer every single second because 200,000 new people are born. So the amount per Bitcoin per human being goes down every single second of existence forever. And that no human being can take it from me. No human being can ever steal it from me. No human being can deflate it away, confiscate it, have influence over it. It's just that we're so early. Like, I remember, guys, in 1994, I had in my industry one of the first websites. Do you realize that it was illegal to have commercial anything on the internet until 1994? The moment that law was lifted, I put up a website for my company. The moment it became legal, 1994, I was early. And people were saying, Oliver, but what are you doing, man? You're going to cheapen your whole Wall Street image. You're a known figure. What are you doing? Websites are for criminals. Websites are for porn. You don't have a porn business. You've got a Wall Street advisory business. You're putting up a freaking website and nobody's going to pay you on it. People are going to see you with a website, and it cheapens your brand, Oliver. It cheapens your name. Meanwhile, I took over the industry, became one of the biggest in my industry. I grabbed it early. I saw it early. And guess what? All of them have websites today. But people couldn't see it. It was too early. I was the early adopter of the internet. We're the early adopters of Bitcoin today. Bitcoin's 15 years old, guys. Bitcoin's 15 years old. Apple is almost 50 years old. Apple was 15 years old. Apple was 15 years old in 1991. Imagine thinking that Apple was a bubble in 1991, or Apple was finished in 1991. Oh, it was late. It's late for Apple in 1991. Imagine that. That's when Apple was 15 years old. Bitcoin's 15 years old. That's insane. That's insane. This is like going all the way to 1991 and being able to buy Apple. It's more than that. 15 more years with this. And it's based on the math, it's going to be stupefying. It's crazy. Now, there are a lot of people who are saying, Oliver, but Bitcoin is, each halving has these diminishing returns. And, so the halving is just not important anymore like it used to be because there's diminishing returns. I don't buy into this, what I call this silly theory of diminishing returns. Because, guys, if you think about it, how can you start diminishing returns at half of 1% adoption? Did Apple have diminishing returns in 1991? Did Microsoft have diminishing returns at its 15-year birthday? There's no diminishing returns, and you're just at the beginning. You're confusing something here. Diminishing returns happens toward the end of an adoption cycle, at the end of something. It doesn't happen in the very, very beginning. Oh, well, we've reached half of 1%. It's all downhill from here. Like, how does that even freaking make sense? How? Half of 1% world. As people say, well, Oliver, I think that there's more people that have Bitcoin than half of 1%. Show them to me. Show them to me. Show me someone in your family that owns Bitcoin, that has Bitcoin. Zero, right? All right. Show me a neighbor. Show me one of your neighbors. Anyone. Neighbors? Any of your social groups, Sunday school, church, just show me who has it. Your son's baseball team, the fathers that show up, take their sons to the Little League baseball team. How many of them have Bitcoin? No one has it. And it's the best performing thing humans have ever come in contact with. My God, can you imagine when you're going to be able to say, X number of family members have it, X number of my neighbors have it, X number of the people in my church have it, X number of the guys I hang out with at my son's Little League. Can you imagine where we're going to be when that happens? And it's happening just like it happened with the internet from 1994. I was one of the first in my industry to put a website up. It didn't stay there. It didn't stay with just my website, right? So, wow, guys, this is stupefying when you start to wrap your mind around this in the proper way, when you start to frame it in the proper way. A lot of people don't understand, guys, that humans adopt things the same way over and over and over again. They don't adopt one thing this way and another thing that way. It's the same adoption curve for everything that has ever come into the human domain. Humans adopt it the same way, whether we're talking about electricity, whether we're talking about fire, whether we're talking about the use of the number zero, whether we're talking about the use of the wheel, whether we're talking about electricity, whether we're talking about cars, televisions, radio, the internet, Bitcoin. It's adopted the same way. Humans can only adopt one way. Now, this Gartner hype cycle is often part of the way humans adopt things, right? And the way it goes is like this. Once there is excitement about something, like the internet, when it finally started to catch, there was this excitement that creates this hyperbolic move to the upside. We experienced this with the internet, which helped to create the .com bubble, right? We overhype it initially, creating this massive bubble. Then that bubble sort of bursts, and then what happens is that most people stop being hyped about it. All right. And then it starts to regain interest, power, adoption, but at a more sustainable pace. And this is the one that goes on forever. Forever, guys. Now, a lot of people say, well, Oliver, what do you mean adopted forever? Well, think of it this way. Airplane travel, commercial airplane travel has been with us since what, 1905? It's well over 100 years, well over 120 years, well over 125 years, something like that, right? And yet, only 1 in every 4 human beings have ever been on a plane. It's a 125-year industry, and it's still being adopted by human beings. It still has massive growth ahead of it. Commercial air flight, commercial air travel. Only 1 in every 4 human beings have ever been on a plane. Its future is incredibly bright. It's only 1/4 of the way there. Commercial air flight. How many people are cars still being adopted? Of course. Fire is still being adopted. And that's 4 million years old. Do you know how many people don't have access to electricity today? Electricity is how old? It's still being adopted. How many people don't have a computer? How many people don't have an iPad? How many people don't have access to the internet? Guys, these things get adopted forever. And remember, there's 200,000 new adopters born every single day. Bitcoin's going to be adopted forever. It will go up forever. And a lot of people say, well, Oliver, but it's hard for them to wrap their minds around it. When I say, well, look, silver's 9,000 years old, right? It's been used by humans for 9,000 years old. Is it still around? Yes. Gold, 6,000 years old. The freaking bond market, guys, the bond market is what? 300, 400 years old? The equity market, the stock market that gets so much focus and attention today, it's almost what, 200 years old? Apple's near 50 years old. Microsoft, 48 years old. Google, Amazon's what, 25, 26 years, 27 years old. Google's 25 years old, something like that. Bitcoin's a baby. But it's going to last forever because out of all the things that I mentioned, all the things, they can be touched, manipulated, controlled, confiscated, stolen, influenced by human beings. Out of all the things I mentioned, they have that one weakness. Bitcoin is outside of the realm of all human influence. We can have access to it, but can't have influence over it. We can have access to it, but no human being can ever steal it from you or take it from you or influence it negatively in any way. It's very, very powerful. The world is going to want that over the things that can be stolen, taken, influenced, manipulated, and controlled. They're going to want that in increasing numbers, and we're going to be there waiting. This is where we are. Oh, well, Oliver, diminishing returns. It's diminishing returns from here. How is that? Diminishing returns from here? No, dude, you get diminishing returns on the right side of that, not there. You don't get diminishing returns. We are early in this thing. Now, this is very important to take a look at. I've shown this many times, but I want you to look at this. Is almost every single thing that humans have adopted over the last 100+ years, right? Since 1900. So you see, the telephone, the television, you see everything there. Electricity, air travel, PCs, credit cards, radio, whatever. But there's something interesting I want to point out to you. Look at how the Gartner curve, right? Remember I showed you that? Is that what it's called? Remember the Gartner hype cycle? You see that dip in the middle? I want you to look at that dip in the middle. All right? That's the Gartner hype cycle, right? It causes this overzealous interest initially once the match gets lit. All right? Boom, everybody overdoes it, causing a collapse in the middle. And then we go on to the true sustainable adoption period. That's the Gartner hype cycle. Now let's go to look at all the things that have been adopted. Do you see that Gartner hype cycle there? Do you see how in the beginning things were adopted, initially ran, and then had this middle part that dropped off a little bit. So you see telephones started in 1900, but dropped off around in the 1920s to 1930s. It didn't come all the way to the bottom, but it still dropped off for a decade. Some of these things dropped off for 2 decades, right? But I want you to now go to the far right, and I want you to see something really interesting, the way humans adopt now. There is no frickin' Gartner curve hype cycle anymore. It's straight frickin' up. Boom! Maybe a little taper, but it's not that. We don't have that anymore. Do you understand? You just get this little taper and then it goes into this ever so slight S. Do you understand? It's not straight up, but it's ever so slight S. Before we used to curve back down like that, right? But now it's this ever slight, I don't know if I'm doing it the right way for you, but this ever so slight, and then it curves back up. It's just a little wrinkle now. This little wrinkle, people, this is what the bozos call, oh, it's diminishing returns. No, dude, that's just a little Gartner wrinkle. And this thing is about to come out of that Gartner wrinkle in an explosive way. The same way when it was deep, you came out bullishly off the bottom of the Gartner drop, right? But we don't have the Gartner drop like that anymore. It's evident. Look at all your modern adopted things. They have a little taper, and people start doubting at that little taper. Well, maybe it's over. Maybe it's all downhill from here. Maybe it's diminishing returns. Bozos, they don't know how human beings adopt. And you can't have diminishing returns at 0.5% adoption, people. I believe that not only is Bitcoin not experiencing diminishing returns, that I believe it's going to go into an exponential, explosive second phase that will make the first one look like child's play. And I have history backing me up here, guys. Why? Because it's never the first period that's the most explosive. Never. Look at Apple. Was Apple's first 15 years the most explosive? No, it was the later. It's never the first that's the most explosive. Never. Not with something that's going to last. It's never the first leg, never the first adoption wave. So that first adoption wave does taper off. And then when you get that second one, OMG. Whoo! I just get chills just even thinking about it. I believe that the second leg is the big one. I believe the second phase for Bitcoin is the big one. I believe that the best years are in front of Bitcoin, not in back of it. As miraculous as those gains were, as powerful as its up move was, I believe we ain't seen nothing yet. And this halving, the one that's going to happen in a few days, is the one that's going to kick off the most explosive period Bitcoin's ever had. That's my theory, guys. I don't want you to miss this. And I'm betting big on it. I believe that we're going to come out of that first tapering off period and go into that climactic upper part of its first S, as Bitcoin will S many times over the next several hundred years. Now, this is that Bitcoin hash rate. This is the increase in the computational power being dedicated and contributing to the Bitcoin network. The Bitcoin network wants this. It pays human beings to deliver computational power to itself. It has outlaid its pay scale to the human race and said, I will employ all human beings who give me computational power. All right, now go at it. Here's the pay scale. Any human being can sign up for this. I don't have an employment contract. You can come and go as you want. You don't have to fill out some application. There's no denying you. Just come on board and work for me. Here's my pay. And all it wants is computational power, which now Bitcoin miners, all the way back from 2009, look at what they're doing. It's an exponential increase of how many humans are being hired by Bitcoin or deciding to be employed by Bitcoin, giving their power to Bitcoin, giving their computational power to Bitcoin. These are your insiders, people. Miners know Bitcoin better than anybody else on earth. Do you understand? The real serious ones. They understand the network better than you and I. They're in the trenches. When I was trading on Wall Street, all the stocks that I was assigned to, I kept tabs, right, on what all the insiders were doing with the stocks that I traded. The insiders, I'm not talking about regular employees like the secretaries and things like that. I'm talking about the board members. And I'm talking about the upper echelon of the VPs, the CEO to the layer of vice presidents under the CEO, all your top officers, the chief investment officer, all of those. I kept tabs on them. Now, there's always a reason. There's myriad reasons for these insiders to sell. Selling their shares wasn't all that important. It could be, one guy is taking his family on a trip around the world on his vacation or something like that and needs to sell a few shares. Or he's got twin girls that are graduating Harvard University or something like that. There's myriad different buying a yacht, building a 18,000 square foot mansion in Malibu. There's a million reasons to sell, but there's only one reason to buy. Do you understand this? There's only one reason you see a bunch of insiders all of a sudden at the same time with the same force and frequency start to gobble up with their own money, their own company shares. There's only one reason. They know something. They know something. It's coming down the pipeline, but they know something. They know the company better than anybody. Do you understand? They know the deals that are being made before anybody. And so you watched what they did on the buy side, not so much on the sell side. Do you understand? Now take a look at Bitcoin's insiders. Will you do that for me? Take a look. These are Bitcoin's insiders. What are they doing? They're investing, buying their own network's power. They're telling you, we don't think there's diminishing returns going forward. Look at our investment. Look at how much computational power we're giving to this thing. It's expensive to do this. We're the insiders. We know better than you. And you guys, nobody puts $500 million up to build a brand new mining facility that will go online 3 years from today and won't be profitable for maybe another 2 years after that. That's a 5-year investment. Nobody does that unless they're looking way out. You think they would do that if there was diminishing returns? Are you kidding me? You don't have these countries putting billions on the line to bring online new Bitcoin miners. These Bitcoin miners are expanding their hash power. These are your insiders. The same way I used to watch the insiders, we can watch the insiders of Bitcoin. We need to be concerned when the miners are going the other way. But this shows you they're not. They're in with both feet, both hands, and can't get in enough. They're telling you 5 to 10 years down the line what they're expecting. We have to follow the insiders. Follow the insiders. Ignoring the noise is key, guys. If you listen, I truly believe with every ounce of blood running through my veins, I believe that right now, this upcoming halving, this most important halving, I think it's going to be the most important one. More important than the last ones. This one. Remember that little taper off and boom. I think this kicks this one off. I think it kicks off phase 2. Like phase 2 in Apple was exponentially more than phase 1. I think phase 2, now Bitcoin's going to have many phases, but I think phase 2 is going to put phase 1 to shame. I think that phase 2 is upon us with this halving. And I think it's generational. I think this won't come around for hundreds of years. I think we've got it. I think we're unique in that we're alive right now to witness it, to see it, to participate. And I don't want you to fuck it up. I don't want you to mess this up. I don't want you to miss this. I don't want you to fall prey to the silliness that's out there about this. It's always silliness in the beginning. Always. In the internet, Oliver's for only porn sites. The internet. It's always silly like that. Do you understand in the beginning? And you can't let that get you. But I think that if we don't take advantage of this, if you don't take advantage of this, you will regret for the rest of your life. I believe this. I believe that you will go to your dying day and you will never forget what you missed. I believe it's like that. I believe that your family will forever look on you as being the family idiot. Because they'll always think, if I was back there when Uncle John was around and could have bought this thing, I would have been smart enough. They're all going to think it. They're all your whole future bloodline's going to think they would have been smarter than you. But I believe you're going to regret this for the rest of your life. And I sincerely believe that. That's not rhetoric. We are blessed beyond everyone else just to be here. And Bitcoin is a better bet today than it was in 2009, 2010, 2011, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. That's when it was actually stupid. It's less stupid today. It's less risky today. Do you understand? I just don't want you to miss it. Some people say, Oliver, but why? Oh, it's lonely at the top. Come on, hang out with me. It's lonely at the top. I don't want to be there by myself. A lot of people don't understand that Bitcoin is the first responder. You have a lot of bozos out there that say, well, when Bitcoin takes a sharp drop because of like some news like the war or something like that. Remember back in March of 2020, it was the first thing to crack and drop. And in this new war type scenario, the first thing to really take a big, strong hit. A lot of people don't understand why it will always be the first responder, because when the world panics, they're looking for liquidity. Do you understand what liquidity means? They're looking for liquidity. It's a race to just let me get liquid. Well, what's the most liquid thing in the world today? Bitcoin. Oh, you think it's stocks? Oh, no. Well, what about Saturday? How liquid is a stock on Saturday or Sunday or a holiday? How liquid is a stock after 4 p.m. Eastern time in the wee hours of the morning? Stocks are the furthest thing from liquid. Do you understand? They're liquid in a limited form. Bitcoin's not limited in its liquidity. So the race for just let me get liquid will always be to Bitcoin first. It's 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, never gets hacked, never down, never freaking sick at sea. Of course, it's the first responder. Do you understand? It will always be the first responder. That's not a freaking bug, bozos. That's a feature. That's a feature that it serves the world as being the most liquid thing. It gives you instantaneous access to your wealth, to your well-being, to your life, to everything that you have, everything that's dear to you. It's available to you. It doesn't hold it back. There's no man that says, well, wait a minute, you can't access what's yours. It's 4 p.m. Bitcoin doesn't do that shit. So anything that is the most liquid will be the first responder. Do you understand this? That is not a bug. That's a freaking feature. I'm going to bless Bitcoin for being the first responder, for just being freaking the world's liquidity. When people are in Lebanon banging on the doors of the bank for their life savings, they work their whole life and the bank closes the doors on them. Zero liquidity. You got zero liquidity now for your whole life. Bitcoin doesn't do that. Look at the entire life of Bitcoin. And then that little baby, look at the little baby. You see the little baby? You see the little wick up there? That's what they're worried about. Oh my God, it's over for a bit. It's over for Bitcoin, Oliver. We've got a bail ship. It's over. And you get the real scared ones. But Oliver, it's crashing. It's crashing, Oliver. I'm like, dude, it's little freaking baby wick. What are you talking about? Relax. Relax, dude. Look at it. That's the whole life of Bitcoin. Relax. All right. It's crazy. Now, here's another way that I want to teach you to ignore noise, because you got to be able to ignore the noise to make this generationally count for you. One of the ways is just to measure Bitcoin over major events, nothing in between. So I want you to major events here, right? Take a look at this. Remember the FTX collapse? Bitcoin collapsed. It broke below levels that people thought it would never break or whatever. That kind of market. So the FTX collapse is over here around 15,000 and change, far left-hand dot, right? What was the next major event? BlackRock files for an ETF. OMG. We go from 15,000 That next event happened at 25,000. Now, there was a lot of noise between 15 and 25,000. I know a lot of people Bitcoin between 15 and 25,000. You know who I'm talking about. But look at the jump, 15 to 20. Now, what was the next major thing? SEC approves Bitcoin. That's 45,000. What's the next big event that's Saturday? The halving, where it's 63. Now, if you look at that chart, is there anything about it? I will wait. Is there anything volatile about that? I don't see volatility. You see volatility? I don't see volatility. I see nothing dangerous. I see nothing risky there. I can straight line up every major event. Here's another way is, remember I told you, you look at the halving dates every 4 years. Now, $12 first halving, 653 second halving, 8,568 third halving, 63,000 fourth halving. Look at that chart. Stare at it. Is there anything volatile there? No. Do you see anything risky there? No. Is there anything uncertain? No. What's certain is that every 4 years, the price at the next halving is exponentially higher than the past one. That's what's certain. That's what you see. And so you've got to get into this habit, people, of stepping back and ignoring the noise. You can't do that with this asset. It's so special that you have to find a way to weed out the noise. You do it with major events. Now, I'm going to give you something special. This is something I usually do only for my, I don't really like this term, but it's for lack of a better term, my Bitcoiners. I don't really think I can have Bitcoiners, but you know what I mean. Like the ones that are with me on the journey together, where we're close. They know everything I'm doing. We're doing everything together. Not something I normally share with the general public, but I want you to get in the habit of looking at 2 time frames. One of them is the 2-month time frame. So this will force you to step back, right? Don't look at the daily, don't look at the 15-minute chart, the daily. Look at this 2-month time frame. Now, I want you to note how there's a space between these 2 moving averages. This is the entire life of Bitcoin. The generational accumulation zones exist between those 2 moving averages. If you go back each time, you can see in the year 2000, imagine the yellow starting a little further back. You can see there's a little slip in between in 2015, 14, a little slip in between the 2. And the next time you got that little slip in there was 2018. And then you got the slip in March of 2020 in between in March of 2020. And then you got the slip in between in 2022. And so this 2-month time frame can help you understand when you are in general buy zone area. And it's important because most people are thinking the other way in the generational buy zone. That generational buy zone will set your family up forever. The kids of your kids of your kids will remember your name if you take advantage of that space in between these 2 moving averages. Do you understand what I'm saying, people? Do you understand that Bitcoin is maths? That 1 + 1 will always equal 2. Do you understand that Bitcoin is not in the hands of any human being, so no one can change that? No one can change its function. No one can change what it does. No one can influence it. That generational zone is mathematical. It will freaking close to guarantee that if you act in that zone, your children's will remember your name if you do the right thing. Most people there are out. Most people in that zone have panicked out or selling or reporting. Most people have given up on Bitcoin in the generational zone. I won't let you do that. I wasn't in Bitcoin early, but I played 2 generational zones, 2 of them. The last two, we played it big. So 2-month time frame. Now, the other thing I want to show you is the 4-month time frame. These are the two time frames I want you to become very acquainted with. Do you understand? Once you become very acquainted with these two time frames, it causes you to step back and you stop freaking thinking like a freaking bozo. All right? And I do use a different moving average with this. I use it with this. But as you can see, it comes back to the moving average in that around that moving average period or area. That's also representative of the best time to really get aggressively in. All right. So 2-month time frame and 4-month time frame will keep you in this step back mode. What else? In conjunction with the 2-month and the 4-month, I want you always keeping halving prices in mind. That nothing else really matters in between these halving prices. All right. And major events. All right. You start to freak out a little bit. Just say, well, when was the last major event? Shoot, that was 30,000 points away. Okay. And major events measure price between don't take little minor events, major events, measure the prices, keep yourself aware of the prices of each halving date. They're guaranteed to go up forever. 2-month time frame and 4-month time frame should keep you sufficiently zoomed out so you're not fooled by the noise, guys. There is another big noise item today I want to make you aware of. Gold has failed us. Let me just say this, guys. I don't care what you hear. I don't care what the rhetoric around gold is. Oh, gold's at new all-time highs, and governments have been buying it the most aggressively for a long time in history. And bullshit. Gold has failed us, and I don't want you falling for this noise. Don't fall for this. You understand? But Oliver, gold's making new highs. Bullshit. And what do you mean it's not making new highs, Oliver? I see it on the chart. Bullshit. It's not making new highs. Gold has failed us. Gold started failing us hundreds of years ago. Do you understand? We're in this freaking mess today because gold failed us several hundred years ago. We got fiat currency today because gold couldn't keep up. Do you understand? Don't go backwards here, guys. Don't go backwards. Don't be like, but Oliver, what if I have some Bitcoin and some gold? Dumb. Sorry. It's just dumb. There are dumber things, of course, but it's still dumb. All right? You want 1% gain versus 1,000% gain? Like, it's dumb. Let me show you this. Here is what the dollar, the dollar wants to trick you. The dollar wants you to use it as the measuring device. And it says the dollar's like a pair of glasses, right? The dollar's like the pair of glasses. Dollar says, no, look at everything through me. That's what the US dollar wants. So it says, no, put me on. And you put the US dollar glasses on, right? And then you see the gold chart and you're like, oh, that's nice, right? No, that's not nice. Because the worst glasses to view anything with is a fiat currency. So what you should do is measure everything against Bitcoin and M2 money supply. You take the Bitcoin glasses and you see a different picture. You take the M2 money supply glasses and you're like, holy, it's a completely different picture. The US dollar's lying to you. Look at the US dollar's chart. Now look at the M2 money supplies chart. Gold is not keeping up with the money supply, which means that gold hasn't outperformed M2 money supply since 1980. This is the chart of what gold holders are experiencing. They're not experiencing this. They're not experiencing this, guys. They're not experiencing that. That's the lie. Do you understand? That's the lie. This is the truth. This is really what gold holders have been experiencing. Since 1980, they've been losing, even on a US dollar basis. 2011, gold's 1900, Bitcoin's 1. 2024, gold's 2374. A tiny, what is that, a freaking rise for ants? And Bitcoin's at 63,000? Are you kidding me? But Oliver, I think I should have both. Why? Why? Like, why? Look at this. Why? It's a loser. And on top of that, guys, think about this. I showed you Bitcoin's entire monetary policy laid out all the way to 2140. Show me goals. Show me goals monetary policy. Let's scratch that. Let's look at it a different way. Who owns the majority of gold on planet Earth? Governments? Co-opted, no? Do governments own the majority of Bitcoin? Even if they did, they can't control it. So governments own the majority. When you own the majority of the supply, you can manipulate it, control it, with the exception of Bitcoin. I don't care. You could own 19 million of the 21 million and you have zero influence over Bitcoin. It's a completely different animal. But gold you can co-opt. If I hold the majority of the supply, and I can create any value I want to. Guys, the United States set the gold price at $20.67. Maybe I got the pennies off a little bit, but in the late 1980s, I mean the late early 1920s or so, throughout the 1920s, gold was actually set at a stable price of $20.67. It's crazy, right? How do you do that if it's not controlled? How do you set the price of something unless you control it? It was set to $20.67. Now get this. Gold was, I'm going to use this word a little loosely. In 1933, Act 6102, President Roosevelt confiscates gold from all U.S. citizens. Doesn't really confiscate it. It's unfair to say the government confiscated gold because they actually paid every American citizen for their gold. So that's not confiscation in a way. All right. It was for sale, but it's not true confiscation. Confiscation is you get nothing. All right. So it was purchased from them, but it was purchased at $20.67, something like that. Right. And as soon as they got all the gold, the majority of which was already in custody anyway, as soon as they got the rest of it from American citizens, they instantly jumped the price up to $35. How do you do that? Like, what is this, some item that you created? It's a freaking farce. Do you understand? It's a farce. It's manipulated, it's controlled, it's co-opted by governments. And who says, they say, oh, gold is at $15 trillion. Who says it's worth 15 trillion? Who? Show me the person who says that. How do you know? How do we know? Nobody's telling us how much gold they have, right? No one was around 7,000 years ago accounting for every ounce that came out of the ground, right? Like, who made up that number for us to believe this shit? I know where every single Satoshi is, when it came into existence, where it is now. I know the Satoshis that will be released in the world all the way to 2140. I know it down to the freaking minute. Do you understand? It's audited for me every 10 minutes forever. And you can't even show me one single audit from a government, from a Federal Reserve Bank. Who made that number up? We've been duped. I was a gold bug. We've been duped. We've been shamboozled. We've been flipped. We've been taken advantage of. We've got the real thing now. Do you understand? The thing that no human being can fuck up, can control, manipulate, steal, or take from me. Something that gets audited in my face every 10 minutes. There's a brand new audit that the world can take a look at, that every single individual Satoshi is accounted for. And every single human being on earth has access to this audit, has access to the information. It's a freaking open book. I can track every single Satoshi from the very first instant it has come into existence. I can tell you when all the future ones come into existence. That's fair. That's open. That's true accountability. And it's never been hacked. Never been down over the past 10 years, never sick at sea. The only thing on earth that trades and is available to you 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, the only thing that another human being can't steal from you, take from you, confiscate from you, or inflate away from you. It never breaks its promise. It is doing the very same thing it's always done from the moment it came into the human experience. Everything in your life has broken a promise to you. Everything in your life has disappointed you. Your kids have disappointed you. They've broken promises to you. Your parents, all right? Some people think my God has as well. Your church, your neighbors, everything on earth has failed you. Your financial advisors have failed you. Your accountants have failed you. Your banks have failed you. The stocks have failed you. The bonds have failed you. The politicians have failed you. The law has failed you. Everything in your life has failed you or disappointed you in one way or another. And the only thing on planet Earth that has never broken a promise, that has never failed, is Bitcoin. See, only thing we have in the entire human experience today that is fair, open, and never breaks a promise, never down, can't ever be hacked, can't ever be stolen, can't ever be confiscated, can't ever be debased, can't ever be touched by another human being, but yet is available to every human being. It's powerful. Do you understand how powerful that is? You're telling me that we're not going to go from half of 1% understanding this and seeing this and having it to 1%, 3%, 5%, 10%, 40%, 60%? But Oliver, they're going to ban it. You can't ban it. Dude, the United States government can't even ban TikTok. They're going to ban Bitcoin? Get out of here. Get out of here. That's how we used to say it in Brooklyn. Get out of here. You look at things by denominating them in Bitcoin. When you look at gold and Bitcoin prices, when you look at gold in Bitcoin, this is what you are experiencing as a gold holder. It's a distraction, guys. Don't let them distract you away from the best thing that has ever become available to human beings. Don't let them distract you. Gold is the distraction right now. This is gold in Bitcoin terms. Forget that. That is a losing proposition. In M2 money supply terms, it's a loser too. It's only a winner in dollar terms, but we know what the dollar's doing. It's lost 98. The dollar has lost, guys, right? The dollar has lost US dollar purchasing. The dollar has lost 99+ percent of all its purchasing power. Do you understand what that even means? Do you understand that? This is the US dollar's loss from 1900. Does that look like a success story to you? Does that look like that looks like that's what you should trust? That's what you should believe in? Does that look like a freaking success story to you? When you negate or deny Bitcoin, you're telling me this is the success story, Oliver. It's not Bitcoin. And that is why I think you're an idiot. This is a fail. This is a failure. You would never want your kid to look like, you would never want the progress of your child to look like this, or anything that you create to look like this. Do you understand? Nobody does. But we're being taught that no, use the failed item to judge everything. Use the failed item. This is using the failed item to judge gold with, and this is using the winning item. The pictures are very different. Don't get distracted, people. Okay. Bitcoin is the new way, guys. This was the old way. Look at how disgusting that is. You know how many people died, man, mining gold? How many people died mining Bitcoin? Seriously? You know, this is not right. This is the new world of mining for value. This is the old world of mining for value, a freaking rock. Our lineage, our grandkids, our great grandkids can be like, you guys worshipped a rock? Are you serious? And we're going to be like, yeah, we didn't know. You guys actually sold Bitcoin? Granddad, you sold it? The rarest asset in the world? And so what to expect, guys? Let's look at some things. Let's look at some things forward. Bitcoin has a very, very mathematical, guys, Bitcoin has a very mathematical pattern to itself. It's literally baked into the code. 3 years up, 1 year down. 3 years up, so 2011, up 12, up 13, up 14 down. 3 years up, 15, 16, 17, up 18 down. 3 years up, 19, 20, 21, 1 year down, 2022. 3 years up, right? 2023 up, 2024 up. What's next? Up, 2025. Now, here's the thing. Here's the thing. Smoke on this. Are you ready? Okay. The year before the down, which is the last up, is the meteoric one. That's the exponential one. We're not even halfway into the second one yet. The big one is 2025. If history is any guide, and history is a guide. A lot of people say, well, Oliver, past performance is no guarantee of future results. History doesn't have to repeat itself. I know that, but history is the only thing we have to use. Can't use anything else. If you don't use history, then what do? Like twiddling your thumbs in the wind like this? You got to use the only thing you've got. The only thing we've got is history. So we got to use it. In addition to that, Bitcoin is maths. It's the only asset that's actually simply math. Every other asset was man-made, right? If it wasn't man-made, it was man-co-opted. Gold wasn't man-made, but it was co-opted by man. Every other asset, stocks, bonds, all assets are created by men, right? Well, this asset is maths. 1 + 1 = 2. Look at the math play out. I'm not making this up. 3 years up, 1 year down. 3 years up, 1 year down. That's as certain as 1 + 1 = 2. 3 years up, 1 year down. 3 years up, and the last up year is the meteoric one. And you're selling Bitcoin, or you're doubting it right now? You're thinking that it's over now? I'm trying to save you here. 2025 is the big one. We've still got time here. That's the meteoric one. Now, every 4 years, every time after the halving, Bitcoin adds a zero. How many of you know that? Bitcoin adds a zero. So guys, this is this is a a neat little spiral chart. A complete circle represents 1 4-year period, right? So think about this. We started out from zero, and then we added as we started out from we went from 0 to 10. Then from 10, we added a zero the next 4 years. We went from 10, you add a zero to 10, we went to 100. Then you add a zero the next 4 years. From 100, we went to 1,000. And then another zero, we went to 10,000. Where's the next one? 100,000. All right. So every 4 years, you add a zero. The last one was 10,000. Remember, guys, don't forget, the last halving happened. Remember where it happened? Let me show it to you. The last halving was 8,568. So it did achieve the 10. Now, after this halving, we should achieve the 100,000. Greater than 100,000. But here's the thing. Remember, Bitcoin shot past 10 all the way to 69,000? It doesn't just add the zero and stay there. It goes exponentially past the zero. So we went exponentially past 10,000 to 69,000. Now, the next zero to be added in this halving, it's to achieve, right, 100,000, but it should go exponentially past 100,000. What's exponentially past? Well, it went 7 times past the last one. What if it went 7 times past 100,000? What if it went 5 times past 100,000? What if it went 3 times past 100,000? How crazy is that? What if it freaking went 2 times past it? You get what I'm saying? It doesn't just go to, it doesn't just add the zero and stop there. It goes way past the zero. All right. So by 2025, if history's any guide, we should be way past 100,000. I'm not making this up. I'm just using history. I'm just using maths. All right. You want to fight with me? Don't fight with me. Fight with mathematics. Fight with history. Why is this halving different, though? I definitely need to cover this. It's different because for the first time, supply is leaving centralized exchanges. That's very powerful. Throughout, guys, think about this. Bitcoin became the best performing asset the world has ever known. It went from 0 to $1.4 trillion. It became the best of the best in every conceivable category, and supply was rising. Holy shit. Guys, it did it in, look at the chart. Look, supply was rising. Look at the little dots on the supply. It's freaking rising. Usually that doesn't, you don't get rising supply and the best performing. Dude, it was the best performing asset human beings have ever encountered with rising supply. Now supply is declining? Are you freaking kidding me? OMG, declining supply? Guys, this could be the big one. This could be the big one. Do you understand? Oh, my God. And no, don't even look at this, guys. We never had demand. No, guys, throughout all of the halvings, Bitcoin never had demand. No demand. Best performing asset in the history of the world, no demand. Number one in every conceivable category. No, without demand, no demand. Remember, you can't find me a family member with Bitcoin. You can't find me a neighbor. You can't find me a social group member. You can't walk up and down the street and say, I bet you this person has Bitcoin, that person has Bitcoin, this person. All you can say is, I bet you nobody has Bitcoin. Now, I bet you nobody has Bitcoin. The majority of the world still doesn't have Bitcoin. That's not demand. You can't say that half of 1% adoption is demand. That's zero demand. But this cycle is different because for the first time in Bitcoin's history, we have demand. We've got institutions pouring billions of dollars into spot Bitcoin ETFs. We got 22 new Hong Kong-based ETFs coming online. The UK announced they're going to approve new Bitcoin ETNs for accredited investors. You got countries firing up Bitcoin mining all over the world today. You've got cities starting to make it legal tender. One country right now made it legal tender. Like, are you kidding me? For the first time, there is demand. The era of demand is this halving, this cycle. We've never had it. And I am telling you that when you add the supply drop with the first time Bitcoin's experiencing real demand, and you get numbers that can be so freaking stupefying that I'm almost afraid to say them. Could we, Bitcoin balances going through the roof, could we be on the verge of a rise in the value of Bitcoin so meteoric that it puts every other rise to shame? Could we? Maybe. I mean, haven't we experienced an all-time new high before the halving for the first time in Bitcoin's history? The signs are there that this is different. We're in uncharted territory now. That things are being stretched this way to the upside. We should be at 40,000 now. We're at 63,000. Do you understand? We should be at 40,000 now. Based on history, what has happened before every halving, we should be at 40,000. We're at 63,000. That's not freaking normal. But neither is declining supply on exchanges for the first time normal. Nor is demand, institutional sponsorship. Guys, we've got the first time in Bitcoin's history there's a permanent institutional bid in the market, meaning that there will never not be a buyer on the institutional side. Never. In the history of Bitcoin going forward, never. Could this be the setup for something we've never seen before? Because we've never seen these things before. I say yes. I say this could be the big one, guys. I say this could be the big one. Now, where do we witness this halving? On Saturday, when this happens, I think it's slated Saturday, Eastern time, there are two places. I love these guys, timechain-calendar.com. I'm going to be watching it here. I'm going to be zoomed in. I'm going to be with my Bitcoiners. We're going to be together. We're going to have Bitcoin hats. Some people are going to have drinks and stuff like that. And we're going to party this thing in. And we're going to watch history be made, knowing that this halving is going to change the trajectory of our bloodline. That is what I believe. That is my message here to you today. We have the opportunity to affect the lives of people not even born yet now, if you do the right thing. It's ours to mess up. This is ours to mess up. There has never, in my experience, been a bet like this. Never. It's asymmetric in nature, people. The second place you can watch this is mempool.space, or you can watch it both at the same time. I like them both. All right. Timechaincalendar.com. I believe that they're on Twitter as well. I think it's Time Chain Cal. All right. But mempool.space. And we're going to watch this block, this 840,000th block go by. Boom. And we're going to see that issuance go from 6.25 to 3.125. And it's historical. I want to share something with you. I made a promise about 2 years ago when I started becoming very active on X.com, formerly known as Twitter, that I would do this once Bitcoin hit one. I would do this up to the point where Bitcoin hit 100,000, meaning I try to answer every single one of your posts. I try to give you daily content, my thoughts, my ideas, and certain things like that. That is unsustainable to me. I can't do that forever. So I picked a point. I'll do it until Bitcoin reaches 100. I actually wish I did it at a smaller price. I wish I did the promise at new highs, but I'm going to stick to my promise. My name is Oliver Velez, and I am your 13%er Bitcoiner. Be safe out there, and until next time. Boom!